The Justice Department says it's looking into the shooting death of Trayvon Martin to determine whether federal prosecutors should file criminal civil rights charges now that George Zimmerman has been acquitted in the state case. The department opened an investigation into Martin's death last year, but stepped aside to allow the state prosecution to proceed. Now, in a statement released Sunday, the DOJ reported, quote, that experienced federal prosecutors will determine whether the evidence reveals a prosecutable violation. What would this ultimately mean for Zimmerman?
I mean, they would need to show and demonstrate that Trayvon Martin was murdered, was killed due to some sort of racial motivation or animosity on George Zimmerman's part. It's a much more difficult thing to prove than just something like, say, manslaughter, where George Zimmerman wrongfully caused the death of Trayvon Martin by initiating a conflict and then shooting him to death. You have to get into Zimmerman's head a little bit there. It's harder to do, but the facts in the case are pretty straightforward. And I mean, I think if it's the type of case that the Justice Department could pursue, it's not easy to win. But these types of cases do exist. They have been brought in the past, and it does seem to me that there is enough evidence to at least bring the case, or at least contemplate bringing one. Given given that Trayvon Martin was armed with a can of iced tea and a bag of Skittles, and as Mark was detailing, he didn't seem to be guilty of doing anything more suspicious than just being young, black, and outside.
And I think there is a sense of hopelessness.
Absolutely.
That things aren't going to change.
Yeah. I think the hopelessness is well founded to some extent. I mean, I think all we have is hope. I mean, that's the thing we hang our hats on. That's the thing that we struggle to move forward on. But when I see that image, when I think about the young men who I grew up with, the young men who will grow up after us, I think about the sense of hopelessness and despair they may have, not just because they're Trayvons, but because even if they're already living under the threat of death, but then on top of that, they have the threat that their death will go unavenged, that they're disposable, that the state literally views them as disposable, that they don't matter. I think that's what the message, that was the message that they received this weekend, and I think that's what's so troubling, and that's why I agree with Zach. I think it's at least important to contemplate a federal investigation.